The CoinWeek Podcast is brought to you by PCGS. PCGS is happy to announce the latest hunt for modern numismatic rarities with the 2020 PCGS Quarter Quest, just in time for the Great American Coin Hunt and National Coin Week. This program is designed to engage numismatists from around the country to cherry-pick the elusive West Point Mint quarters from circulation. In addition to being another set of great circulating West Point coins, these rarities will feature the first U.S. quarters with a V75 privy mark denoting the 75th anniversary of World War II. For additional information, visit PCGS.com and happy hunting. This week on the CoinWeek Podcast, Stacks Bowers co-founder Harvey Stack joins me to discuss his company's recent move from their iconic 57th Street location. So much numismatic history transpired over the course of 7 decades that Stacks conducted business in the heart of midtown Manhattan, just across the street from the Russian Tea Room, a block away from Carnegie Hall, and within walking distance from New York's iconic Times Square. Over the course of this period, there wasn't a month that went by that Stacks didn't offer up a major collection at auction, and through their doors walked some of the most storied figures in hobby history. Harvey reminisces on the place that he spent most of his adult life and the amazing impact Stacks at 57th Street had on the hobby, next on the CoinWeek Podcast. Hi everybody, this is Charles Morgan from CoinWeek. I'm delighted in the midst of our nationwide lockdown to bring you one of the coin collecting hobby's preeminent figures. Harvey Stack has worked as a professional numismatist his entire life. Son of another legendary numismatist, Morton Stack, Harvey has served the numismatic community in New York City and across the country as the head of the family business, Stacks, which since the 1950s has been located in 57th Street in the heart of Midtown New York. Harvey has worked with numismatic organizations too numerous to list and was named by Jimmy Carter to sit on the U.S. Assay Commission in 1976. He worked with Congress to implement the Hobby Protection Act and advocated for the release of the 50-state quarters program. His work with Louis E. Eliasberg and Josiah K. Lilly not only led to the building of 2 of the most significant coin collections in American history, but also greatly contributed to the growing popularity of our hobby. With his son Lawrence, Harvey and lifelong friend Q. David Bowers formed their present company, Stacks Bowers. Throughout it all, 57th Street, Stacks' retail coin location, continued to serve the New York community. That is until recently, when the company announced that it was to close its doors and move to a new home, leaving behind decades of untold coin stories and a life filled with memories. Harvey, what a legacy for your coin shop on 57th Street.
Well, we always try, going back to the folks, my father and my uncle who, developed the strictly numismatic company back in 1933, tried to locate themselves in places where people would feel comfortable walking and that transportation would be easy. And each almost decade, they had found places that they had to move to keep up with the constant developing of New York City. Retail shops started down really years back in lower New York. And then they moved up to Midtown, lower Midtown, which was around 23rd Street, going up towards the Times Square area. And we followed the crowd because that's where the people went and the traffic, even the foot traffic, was better. We always tried to have a retail shop because people like to walk by, look in the windows, maybe come in and show us a coin that they found in the attic or in grandma's sewing box, and also come in and buy and sell coins. So we moved from in the 1930s up from 6th Avenue, 23rd Street, had stayed there for a while, and then as the population moved, as we say in New York, north, that's going towards Central Park and things like that. We moved up to 46th Street, and we had two different locations there. One was larger than the other. So we did move ourselves around, and by right after the Second World War, we bought a building on 46th Street and used it continuously to 1953. And the reason we did that is because it was up in a quarter of a block away from Fifth Avenue, a great shopping street in New York, and it was a through street, which means it went straight through from east to west, and also it had transportation nearby with the famous Sixth Avenue subway just on our corner, and then of course another one that came down at the other corner, which was Seventh Avenue. So it was and it was a wide street. It was 6 lanes wide rather than the narrower streets that most of the city has. So it was a popular street, a walking street, with Carnegie Hall, as you mentioned, across the street, and next door to us was Steinway Hall. A number of art companies had opened up. So by 1953, we decided to move to West 57th Street, and that's where people found us very, very easily. We were at the same location then, from 1953 to last month, when we were asked to leave, and we did not leave on our own volition. What happened was the Calvary Baptist Church, which was a landmark place, which was part of our large building, also housed the Hotel Salisbury, of which we were considered the tenant of theirs. And the Calvary Baptist Church had to do a major renovation because it was getting too crowded with their visitors. For years, they were trying to sell all the property, but couldn't find a buyer. And then, and even as far back as 10 years ago, we were asked, would we move if they find a buyer? We said yes. We didn't think anybody would buy that property because it was so large, and the church wanted so many things, including having the church rebuilt on the site, which was attached to us. So we just stayed there, and we lived there, and all of a sudden, about 4 years ago, they built a skyscraper on our corner, which is at 57th Street and 7th Avenue, and which was over 100 stories high, and that all of a sudden made the part of the city change. And what was changing was more builders wanted to build larger buildings on the site. The Calvary Baptist Church and its Hotel Salisbury probably had about 150 to 200 feet of ground space facing 57th Street, was attached to a housing building behind it, so that altogether it was a great spot to build a place. They just had to find somebody with the money. They finally found somebody who would do it, promised to rebuild the church on the spot, and we were asked to leave after 67 years. So that's the story. What happened? We were not thrown out. We did pay our rent always on time, and we always enjoyed having people walk by. So it was a great shock to me, who had been in the shop since 1953. I was part of the moving department at that time for 46th Street, and therefore I found that it was a great, let's say, losing a best friend, losing a landmark, losing everything that we had worked to keep going.
Of course, the next chapter will be written at the new location. But during your stay at 57th Street, Stack's was not the only player in town. You had some fairly serious competition. So what did Stack's do differently then to stand the test of time?
First of all, when we first started, going back to the 1930s, most dealers that were in New York did have showrooms or little offices up in buildings. Very few had retail shops. And my father and my uncle being both good numismatists and merchandisers, said the best way to get people to come to see you is in a street floor location. So they opened this place on 23rd Street, and 6th Avenue, which was right in, at that time, an epic center, because it was where other buildings were occurring. Madison Square Garden was not too far away. Fifth Avenue was a block away. Broadway was on the other side. So this was the type of location they wanted. And then what happened was, when we moved to 46th Street, all of a sudden, within a 5-year or 10-year period, a number of dealers opened near us to try to either get those who visited us to go over. Now, what we did, we introduced Retail Shop, which had sit-down showcases, rather than the jewelry store type case, which was stand-up. People were able to sit down and relax. We even had a couch and some soft chairs in the very front of the shop, just so that people would come in if they wanted to rest a little bit, wanted to meet a friend there, waiting for somebody to wait on them. They had a place to sit, and it became a center of like a clubhouse, because what happened was, primarily on a Saturday, New York City worked a half a day, and they tried to, the collectors who worked, a lot of them in the area, came and walked over and stopped over to meet some friends and talk about coins. And we became, were considered the New York Clubhouse without having a name in front saying club. And, but we had auction sales at the shop. We had people who came in with collections. We sat and looked at it and advised. And we also, of course, waited on trade. And we were just lucky that we had a good inventory to attract those who wanted a very low price coin for a couple of dollars maybe, right up to a more expensive coin. So it became a place for people to visit. And that's why when people came to see me, the first thing I would do if I was sitting in the back office and it was somebody I knew, I would run up to the front of the shop as long as my cousins did, and my father and uncle, and greet them and get to know them on a real personal basis. It was a friendly coin shop. Yes, we were interested in buying. Yes, we were interested in selling, but it was a friendly place to visit.
It also seemed to me that you had a place where a guy like Colonel Green or Colonel Flanagan could show up and rub elbows with somebody interested in buying modestly priced coins. That Stack's at 57th Street was not simply a destination shop for the well-heeled collectors, but for all collectors.
Right. Well, let me say this. I became I guess you call it a weekend helper at the shop when I was about 8, 9, 10 years old. And I first met Colonel Green when he came on a Saturday in his large limousine. Came over and said to my father or my uncle, whoever was taking care of him at the time, well, what do you got new for me to look at? And he would look at, let's say, 5 or 6 trays of new acquisitions. And he would say, and how much is this whole tray? All these trays. So they put a price on it. And he says, okay, I'll take them. He would take the 5 trays himself, out to his limousine car. They'd put the trays in the trunk. They would take them home, and then the next week he came in again or sent in a check and paid for him right on the spot. So that was the first encounter with wealth that I remember. The second one, of course, was Colonel Flanagan, who was another one of these collectors that liked to buy quantity like foreign gold primarily. And I remember just taking coins out and showing to them and helping them pack them up and get them ready to go. So, and of course, we met, who came to us, visiting us from Baltimore, was somebody like Louis Eliasberg, who had business dealings in New York and was a coin collector, but he really started out wanting to be primarily a person who could buy gold coins. Because if you remember, In 1933, they put the gold at 34. You had the Gold Restriction Act, and people were bringing gold coins in and selling them because we were able, because the price was of gold had risen to $35. Even though, let's say, a $20 gold piece was only $20 to spend, we would buy them. We would and also sell them to the public for a few dollars profit here and there. But we were, let's say, a place that people got to know that they could sell their gold or silver or coins to us, and so that when Louis Eliasberg was talking to my father and uncle one day, he said, someday I would think about trying to get a complete collection. So I believe it was my father said, "Hey, Lou, let me tell you something. There is a collection that's coming to the market, and we just don't have all the funds to pay for it." It was the Clapp collection. Clapp collection was one of the almost complete collections of United States coins ever assembled. And Louis Eliasberg asked us to try to get it for him. Well, we made the deal. We paid $100,000, which was a humongous amount of money. It was almost a complete collection, by the way, in high condition that was ever assembled. And Louis Eliasberg bought it, gave us $110,000 for it, and that was our profit for getting it and negotiating the deal. And from that point on, we were involved with selling and buying from Louis Eliasberg to get the collection complete. And of course, his was the only complete collection of United States coins. And I'm using the word generally, not with every dime variety and things like that, but dates and mint marks that had ever been assembled. So that was our, let's say, a beginning of growth in a great way. I can tell you this, in 1947, we sold a collection. It was called the H.R. Lee collection. H.R. was the maiden name, initials of Louis Eliasberg's wife, and Lee was Louis. If you think about it, Louis E. Eliasberg, and these were some of the duplicates that came from the Clapp collection, and a good portion of the money that Louis Eliasberg paid actually was recovered within a few years, and he still had the whole collection in his hands. So it was things that I remember because, of course, the folks always were proud of themselves. And going back, as they say, I started out primarily 8, 9 years old when I was 38, 39. What do you call it? Going into the shop and helping them out on the days that they had. So that was the things that was going on. So that gives you an idea what happened with Stacks having a warm retail place for people to walk into.
Did it ever occur to you that what you guys were doing at Stacks would serve as a template for other successful coin shops around the country?
Well, let me say this. The style we used was duplicated or imitated by the other dealers around the country as well as in New York, where they could get a retail shop. I mean, there's a few that started up. Hans Schulman had a retail shop 1 block away from us on 46th Street. Lester Birkin had a place on 51st Street. Abner Kreisberg and Abe Castle became partners because my father and uncle introduced the two to be good friends to each other. And they became competitors, and they opened up a place on 51st Street, which was also a walking distance from our shop. So we became, as you say, an epic center without having a next-door neighbor as a coin dealer.
In such a competitive environment, how did you all get along?
Well, let me say this. Let me tell you quickly. The father and uncle got along well. They had their sister, Shirley Stack, as a bookkeeper for a number of years because it was easier to hire and pay less money to the relatives, like myself and my two cousins, Ben and Norman. Well, Ben, Norman, and myself joined Stacks as full-time professionals, if you want to use the word, in 1947. And when we each grew up and given responsibilities for it. Ben was the one who liked to travel the country as his father did, Joseph, and he was one of what we call the road people. I was in charge of the shop retail part, and Norman had this great feeling of cataloging, along with, as my father did, and they both just cataloged together many of the early sales that we had. Of course, we were lucky because what happened was we attracted also a lot of good, professional, and well-educated and advanced collectors. So quite often, if we had an ancient coin collection, one of the ancient collectors would come in and help us catalog them. We had a staff that we hired from different places, and people like Henry Grunthal, who later became the curator of the American Numismatic Society, and others like James Riss, who was one of the top English specialists in the world, all were part of our staff. Look, my father and uncle started before I even got there full time. John J. Ford in the business, he worked for us, ended up in service for 3 or 4 years, came back, worked for us for a couple of years, and then decided to go in partnership with Charles Wormser, who was Maurice Wormser's son, in making a coin shop. And guess what? We were on 46th Street. He was up in 47th Street. So in other words, it shows that people did gravitate, and there was a good friendship among the dealers. We worked together. Not everybody had full capital to buy things, so they would share with each other. They would, if somebody buy a wholesale lot, they divided it up among themselves. I mean, we even had people coming from, like, Philadelphia, like Harry Foreman. He was a great, he started out in the fruit business, and believe it or not, he ended up in the coin business because he met a lot of professional dealers and professional collectors, and he brought the material to us, and we divided it up again between ourselves, sometimes with New Netherlands, sometimes with Lester Birkin, sometimes with Christburg, because all of us were not heavily capitalized for some of these larger deals that came through. So, but meanwhile, we were buying from the sources that put things away years back. It was very, very common for dealers in the 20s and 30s when they were able to get coins. They didn't buy a single coin necessarily. They also quite often bought rolls, or bought several rolls of the same date. And we used to use it, as everybody else did, to stock, take care of individual collectors who wanted individual coins.
At the same time, most of you are conducting auctions. But Stacks had a lengthy auction record, which continues to this day with Stacks Bowers. So what were the Stacks auctions like in the 1950s and 60s?
They were more fun than today, only because, we did have people who phoned in bids, and we did have people which is one of the things that a lot of people did. They sent in mail bid sheets because not everybody could travel to New York and or take the time off to get there. We also had public sales. We had public sales that were held, smaller sales which were held in our shop, which could seat 50 people when you moved the counters out of the way. We would go to hotels and take larger ballrooms when it was a more important collection, and we usually filled them up. We also went to places like Steinway Hall, and we used their rehearsal rooms for an auction sale. And we also were in the Carnegie Hall, had a rehearsal department under the what we call the basement, which we also sold in. We also sold in several of the hotels that were near us. Across the street from us at that time was the Great Northern Hotel, which was eventually sold to the Park and Meridian people. It was a great place for people who were traveling by train money because it was owned by the Great Northern Railroad. We had up on the corner the Park Sheridan Hotel, and that's where we went also for several A&A shows, which we conducted. We were in one of the larger downtown hotels, like the Sheridan downtown, which was a large building at the time. So it was, and of course, we were on the road. We sold at, during the times, we sold a number of convention sales. We were the first ones in 1939 to sell at an A&A auction, and then we had a second one in which was held in New York because of the World's Fair that took place in the same year and brought thousands of people into New York. And I'll tell you something, I never remember seeing that many people coming to a convention. Then, of course, in 1940, we took the convention sale because they thought we did so well, and we sold it in Detroit. We've had other A&A sales, but then, of course, later on, which you've talked about, we went on the road again with, for example, the apostrophe auctions, which we started in 1979 in partnership with three other coin dealers, which was Rakoa, the Kreisberg, and I missed his name. But a group of dealers got together, and we made a special event, usually a week or two before the A&A. So, and that was an 11-year project we kept doing. So, even as far as the 1990s, we were still getting involved with working closely with a lot of dealers. This was the way we learned to grow. So that's what we tried to do.
So what were some of the most pressing issues that you had to deal with running a major numismatic firm from the 50s through the great coin boom and through the major transformational period of the 80s and 90s? You had to have played a significant role in shaping the hobby as we know it today.
Well, the things were I, together with other members of the family, became very, very active in getting involved with the government where they started restrictions. Don't forget, we started out life in the business with a terrible restriction, which was hard to deal with, which was the Gold Reserve Act of 1933-34. It made buying and selling of coins a more difficult thing to encounter. Then we were involved with the A&A trying to get involved, and we helped straighten it out that we should have conventions in different cities so that people don't have to travel from the West Coast only because we're only having the conventions in the East. We got involved with them on that basis. We further got involved in 1960 when they had an import restriction on importing of gold coins because so many counterfeits were coming in from Europe as well as from the Far East. We got involved and they restricted and they had some crazy rules that made it almost impossible to import any gold coins because they all had to go through the custom house. And 7 years later, after fighting, our firm fought with the United States Treasury at several hearings, and we won that in 1967, 7 years after all these restrictions started, at a PNG meeting in New York, an officer from the Treasury Department came in and said the case against importation of gold coins has now been rescinded. And you can import more regularly. But please, he always said, make sure they're not counterfeits, So it was one of those things. In 1973, I was active in being involved with the Hobby Protection Act. In 1973, we also had a major meeting in Colorado Springs where they decided they wanted to change the grading standards, and they decided to try to follow Dr. Sheldon's method of numerical grading together with adjectival grading, which was currently used. and they adopted it in 1976. They came out with Annex, which the A&A tried to do the work for the industry, but they were slow. They had a very small staff in Colorado Springs. They were slow in responding, and they were popular, but they weren't so popular. But at least it started groundwork. Then, of course, you're familiar with what went on in the 1980s when the two major dealer groups got together and formed the two separate grading companies, one on the West Coast, PCGS, on the East Coast, NGC, and then all of a sudden that became a new way of grading and taking coins for yourself, to yourself. Each of these services did their job. They did something which was needed greatly. One, they recognized counterfeits more easily than the average collector or buyer. Two, they also pointed out that when a coin was doctored, artificially toned, artificially engraved, or date changed, or the bit mark added or removed, they were able to spot it. That was a great help of taking some of the difficulties of selling coins that all of a sudden turned out to be not genuine. And they had specialists that knew how to look at it. But the Treasury Department and the PNG and all did not have a service available to do this. So dealers got involved and they did it. And that's why you have today a grading service. By the way, we also were, since we built at the original J.K. Lilly collection, which is the famous collection that the government bought in 1967 after he passed away for $5.5 million, also an unheard of number. That we were the ones who built it. We thought we would be able to auction it. They decided to find a buyer with the U.S. government, and the government bought it for the Smithsonian. Since we had worked with the Smithsonian from the days that Dr. and Mrs. Stefanelli worked with us in the 1950s and then became curators out in Washington, we worked with them and made every year donations of coins to keep enhancing the collection and getting people to also add coins that would enhance the collection. So today, the National Collection is considered one of the finest and complete collections of world coins, ancient times to modern times, especially with a gold coin collection like a Lilly collection had, which was it had over 6,500 different gold coins of the world, and including the United States. And with the United States, it was all dates and mints. So you can imagine what kind of addition, why our interest was there. We lost the collection that we built to the government, but on the other hand, we were there to keep enhancing it.
Looking back at 57th Street, what stands out as one of your all-time favorite moments from a career that spans your entire lifetime?
Well, I will tell you, we had several things that happened. We sold most of the major coin collections that came on the market. We were able to help build them originally because, don't forget, the family's been was around for many, many years, for over it was 80 some odd years, but it's now 87 years we were in business since 1933. We built old-time collections, and they was known. We sold for most educational institutions that had coin collections. We sold private collections the same way. We had the good fortune to be able to build them, supply the coins through our auction different ways to make them better. And people always came back to us and said, hey, you did a great job on my way in. I want to give you a chance to do well on the way out. And we fortunately were able to establish one record after another. Don't forget, we were the ones who brought the 1933 and worked it out with Sotheby's to make the sale where we sold at that time the highest price of coin ever brought at auction until Stack's Powers later, a few years later, sold the $17.94 for $10 million. We gathered $7 million for the 1933 at a time when also, again, that was a lot of money. Yeah. Well, let me say this. Today is the fact that the landmark is being removed. We are temporarily in an office on 6th Avenue because we couldn't get out and locate a location that was better. We will be in another month or two located on Park Avenue at 57th Street, near 57th Street, because we have this desire and love for the area that we're in. We're a popular area. It'll be a walk-by area. It'll be a place that we'll be able to serve as we did for all the years we were in New York. However, I will tell you this. The day we closed, I couldn't go down to the shop because it was too emotional a departure for me. So I wished everybody was working there that day health, happiness, and a time to enjoy it. But I will tell you this, it was a shock after, don't forget, I was there from 1953 to 2020. And I can tell you this, I was in charge of riding the trucks in 1953 while my uncle stayed in one place, my father in the other, and we moved the coins from 46th Street to 57th Street. So I want you to know it was a great emotional departure for me, if you can understand.
Well, I can't wait to see the new shop, Harvey, and you can count me in as one of those collectors walking through the doors, hoping to rub elbows with some of the most knowledgeable numismatists in the industry. If you like this podcast, please share it with your friends. And remember, you can download every episode of the CoinWeek Podcast or stream it online for free. Visit coinweek.com to learn more.